Good morning, everyone. So, when I was given this topic to speak about, the first thing I wanted to do was kind of establish how to describe what adoration is for us as Christians, so that we're not just doing a talk about adoration. I wanted to find a definition of adoration. So I read quite a few ideas. I had an idea myself what I think it is, but I'll share this one with you because this one stood out to me. So adoration for Christians could be defined as praising God for who God is. In adoration, the triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is the object of our worship and exaltation. We praise the very nature of God, reminding ourselves that the Father is the most holy, almighty creator of the universe. So it's our praise of God for all that he is. That's a good way to start, so we're all on the same page. In this talk, I want to try and answer two sort of questions. So, what does this psalm teach us about adoration? And how can we then in our lives share songs of adoration? A few, by the way, is just before I go any further, is just to let you know if you want to do some extra reading. Psalms 44, 46 and 47 also have the similar themes to this psalm we're looking at today. So that might be a good thing for you to read at a later stage. And in the psalm, when it mentions the city of our God and Mount Zion, what it's referring to there is the city of Jerusalem. So think of that when it mentions that. That's the things that I might forget to say out of the way, so I'm going to get into it now. When reading the Psalms, something that I find good to do with the Psalms is to kind of look at them verse by verse rather than a whole psalm in one go, because there's a lot in it. Even when we just heard it now, there's a lot to unpick there. So that's what I am going to try and do, but it might not be one by one, like grouped some together. In the beginning, in the verses 1 and 2, the psalmist declares, "Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise." This is emphasizing his power and greatness, and is a reminder that out of everything, it is he, God, who is the most worthy of any praise that we could offer. There is this kind of great wonder and awe surrounding Mount Zion too, which is described as his holy mountain. The adoration is that the Lord is so good and so great that he has allowed this mountain, which is the joy of the whole earth, to form and be present in this place, beautifying the land. Then in verse 3, God is in her citadels, and he has shown himself to be her fortress. This verse can give us confidence that in the trials and battles that we face in life, God is there with us. God is our strength in those difficult times. He is our refuge and safe space. We can use this verse as well to remind us that when we turn to him, we are safe in his hands, praising him for being our fortress where we can rest easy. For the next few verses, I've grouped those together. So verses 4 to 7, which say, "When the kings joined forces, when they advanced together, they saw her and were astounded. They fled in terror. Trembling seized them there, pain like that of a woman in labor. You destroyed them like ships of Tarshish, shattered by an east wind." When kings of the earth joined together and came to attack, they were unable to. Instead, they were astounded and fled, probably in terror. Fear took hold of them there when they saw and understood that the great King, God, was guarding his holy city. They knew they wouldn't stand a chance against God, so they weren't going to attack this place. They hurt like a woman in labor, which kind of implies the pain was pretty bad. The reference to the ships of Tarshish shattered by an east wind reiterates God's power. Strong ships created with the purpose of surviving the harshest seas were shattered. Again, just showing that great power of God. These enemies did not stand a chance. This group of verses is a powerful image, an image of everything being stacked against us, the most difficult and heartbreaking things happening in our lives, yet God through that will guide us and not let bad things win. There is that common expression that people say when everything seems to be going wrong, and they say it never rains, it always pours. Through this passage, it's clear to see that, trying times can come, but our God is bigger, greater, and so much more powerful than any trying times. He's there to be our umbrella when it's pouring. He can disperse the negative so it's not all stacked up against us. Many people, even sitting in this room today, will have real examples of that happening in their lives, where everything seemed to be going against them, yet somehow it turned a corner and became hopeful. That in itself makes me want to lift up praise to God. Just the knowledge and reminder that He is so much bigger and greater than even the most awful circumstances. Then, in verse 8, we get even more evidence to show God bringing us security in Him and being able to reflect on what He's already done, as that's what He did for the people of Jerusalem. It says, "As we have heard, so we have seen in the city of the Lord Almighty, in the city of our God, God makes her secure forever." God gives us security through our faith in Him, and that is worthy of adoration. We may have heard of His miracles in the lives of people around us. We may have heard the miracles in the Bible. We may have even hopefully seen Him working in our own lives, and therefore have our own personal triumphs that we know He had a hand in making possible. Due to this knowledge, we should then have confidence to be able to pray and trust that He will do great things in our lives, and we should have a song of praise to lift up to Him in thanks for all that He has done. Verses 9 and 10 again reiterate that adoration for God and how we might be in awe of His power and strength. It says, "We meditate on your unfailing love." God's unfailing love is so powerful and present that we can meditate on it because it's always there. We can find peace, we can find rest, that His love's never going to stop, it's never going to run out. It also says, "Like your name, O God, your praise reaches to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is filled with righteousness." Again, showing us the worthiness that God holds and how we should be praising Him. He is full of righteousness, keeping His promises and looking after His people. So moving on to the final few verses. In verses 12 and 13, we see God's provision and safety has been given to the people of His city. It says, "Walk about Zion, go around her, count her towers, consider well her ramparts, view her citadels, that you may tell of them to the next generation." The psalmist here is saying, look at the strengths of this building. Look at all that is in place to protect this building from attack. And this is what is inside of us too when we have God in us. He's equipped us with His strength to face whatever may come our way. The final verse of this chapter strengthens this idea more so. "For this God is our God forever and ever. He will be our guide until the end." So, to kind of conclude these thoughts on Psalm 48, we've heard about all these amazing things that God did, and we can rest knowing that He is still doing these things today, which again is a great relief for us. His acts are good, and protection in our lives is being done all the time. He's given us protection, and that's worth celebrating and sharing. no matter how big something that God is doing, you can still share it, even if it's a small thing. Maybe you are always late and you're never late one day because you've asked God to help you. That's something worth praising. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. We can lift up God for anything that he does. If we want our lives to be a song of salvation, or we want to share songs of salvation, we can take some inspiration from something that I read whilst preparing this talk. So some of you may have heard of a preacher called Spurgeon. He did a talk on this whole passage. It's fairly long. I'm not going to tell you the whole of it because it's long. But he had a part of this talk where he was imploring people to remember to be thankful and share the loving kindness of God. So this is what he said, which I thought was worth sharing. So he was talking to the congregation and he said, "Now, my dear sister, you have talked about that rheumatism of yours to at least 50 people who have been to see you. Suppose you tell your next visitor about the loving kindness of the Lord to you. Yes, my dear brother, we all know that trade is bad, for you have told us so every day, for I do not know how many years. And you've always been losing money, though you had no capital when you started. Yet somehow or another, you've managed to have something left even now. We know that old story. Could you not change your note just a little and talk about the loving kindness of God? Yes, my friend, I know that many professing Christian people are not all that they profess to be. I have heard you say so ever so many times. You say also, there is no love in the church. Well, so far as we can see, you are not overstocked with it. You say there's no zeal among the members, but have you any to give away to those who need it? Now, henceforth, instead of always harping on the faults and failings of God's people, which certainly are numerous enough, but have not become any fewer since you talk so much about them, would it not be better to think and talk of the loving kindness of the Lord? It's something to aspire to in a way. Spurgeon here is being quite direct and quite stern with his congregation, but the point he's making is that just making a small change to how you think and how you talk about situations and how you say that things are causing you trouble that could inspire other people. If we just always say about the negative things in our lives, we're not focusing on all that God has done. And I think for most of us here, God has done a lot in our lives, and that is what we should be trying to look towards. It will help remind us of the hope that we have in him as well. It can reassure us that God is for us and has never left or forsaken us. So if we share our stories about what God has done or is doing, that is how we're going to share songs of adoration of him. When we remember these final points I'm going to share, this is an easier thing to do. So these are the things that we should try and remember. There's no problem that we face that is greater than God is. Anything against us, he is against that. His love for us never falters, never fails, and never runs out. He is with us every step of the way. And great is the Lord, most worthy of praise. Amen.